We're back. There is no doubt the Occupy Wall Street protests have ignited support around the country. And it turns out a majority of Americans agree with their beliefs. So what is it about the movement that's drawing growing numbers of Americans? And what exactly are the protesters looking for? Well, Matt Cooper is managing editor of National Journal Daily, and Michelle Goldberg reports for Newsweek and the Daily Beast. I want you to ask Michelle and Matt to look at these numbers. I saw them in the New York Times yesterday. They just blew me away. Charles Blow is a smart guy, ran a comedy, ran through some of these numbers, and they're just amazing. Look at this number here. 86% of the American people say the Wall Street people and lobbyists have too much influence in America's national capital in Washington. That's 86% say they have too much clout, those Wall Street guys. 79% say the income gap in this country is just too big between the wealthy and the other Americans. 71% think bank CEOs should face prosecution for their role in the 2008 crisis, and 68% want the rich to pay higher taxes. Let me start with you, Matt, my friend. It just seemed to strike me as gold for the Elizabeth Warrens of this world, who's up there running for Congress up against Scott Brown in the Senate up there in Massachusetts. The idea that the consumer needs protection against the power of Wall Street lobbyists, the big shots, highly paid people down in Washington, just strikes me as gold. 9 out of 10 people agree with the occupiers on that issue.
Well, that's right, and it's echoed in our own Congressional Connection poll, with 2/3 of respondents saying they support the protesters, 2/3 saying they support the Democratic idea of a surtax on millionaires. Even 1/3 of Republicans we polled support that. People, I think, Chris, got so clobbered by this recession. You know, it wasn't like earlier recessions, which kind of hit some regions harder than others and spared a few people. Everybody got washed over by this tsunami. So I don't think it's that surprising, if you think about it, that they're pretty irate at the financial whizzes who got us into this mess.
Michelle, your thoughts on the sentiments here. I know it's hard to define exactly what the people down on the street are saying. The occupiers, there's a mixed, somewhat of a cacophony to some extent. But the people in the country seem to know what those people want.
Well, right. I mean, despite all of the hand-wringing about what are their demands, the location, in certain ways, is their demand. I mean, it's pretty obvious, gotcha. I think, the outline. They're protesting against economic inequality and unchecked corporate power and kind of corporate malfeasance. And that seems to be really, really obvious, both to most of the people down there and to most of the people watching this. You know, the Tea Party and kind of conservative Republicans like to pretend that they represent, you know, quote unquote, ordinary Americans. But that's always been a fiction. It's been a fiction that a lot of the media is complicit in. You know, ordinary Americans are suffering in this recession, and they want the government to help them out.
You know, I was down in Dominican Republic years ago, Matt and Michelle, and I saw a country that was pretty poor, as we know, Dominican Republic, get away from the resorts downtown. And then I went off one Sunday morning, and I went for lunch somewhere, and I found this neighborhood with all the Mercedes parked outside. And they were all in the country's very elite people were in this little restaurant. I said, wait a minute, this country has like 0.1% of really wealthy people. I get the feeling a little bit like America is getting that feeling, like there's a very, very small group of people living really well, and they don't like the disequality of it.
Right, and they don't think those wealthy people all got there like Steve Jobs by creating something great and earning that wealth. A lot of them feel that they manipulated a financial system that gave them lots of breaks, and when they screwed it up, they got bailed out with their tax dollars. So I think there's a lot of anger. But just to go back to what Michelle said, I think there is a certain amount of overlap between what the Tea Party wants, and what these protesters do. I think both feel that this TARP bailout was a mess, that the Wall Street types use their influence with the government to get special favors. They may disagree about raising taxes, but I think on the question of is Wall Street too powerful, you'd find a lot of agreement.
How do you think it's going to end up, Michelle? We have to get to the end of this conversation. So if you could, I don't like the phrase right now, but I'm going to use the bottom line. Say it's now the end of this year. Where are we going to be in terms of the voice of the occupiers when it gets wintertime?
You know, Well, the encampment itself is probably unlikely to remain the center of attention, although you'll probably see a kind of a diehard contingent who's going to wait it out through the winter. But the most important thing, I think, is that this conversation is happening now. You know, inequality and, again, kind of rampant corporate malfeasance was something that neither party was really talking about until Occupy Wall Street forced them to talk about it.
Because they're getting too much money from these people. That's right. That's where their main money load has been. Thank you so much. We've got to talk a lot more about this fall. Thank you. And maybe it's more interesting than a Republican fight for president. It's what goes on with those people down there. Thank you, Matt Cooper. Thank you, Michelle. It's great having you on.